Well, we get things rolling on a Thursday night. Hope everybody's having a great day. Welcome to the Krueger Show. Once again, brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. You can check them out. They're in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. And sometimes they do run out. So get there early. Go get the brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. And also, we are brought to you by Marin Autoglass, marinautoglass.com on the web. Well, we want to talk a little bit more about the NFL draft, and I heard some amazing stuff today about Brock Purdy that I want to share with our guest, the great Todd Husak, former Stanford quarterback, longtime voice, color analyst on the Stanford broadcast, and you heard him on draft night with Greg Papa and John Lund on KMBR breaking down the Niner draft from the conference room across the hall from the Niner war room there in Santa Clara at the practice facility. And he joins us on the Krueger Show to talk some draft. What's up, Todd? How are you, man? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. It was fun to break down film like that for the first time. Since I coached at Stanford, which was 2005. So yeah, almost 10 years since I'd broken down that much tape on anybody. And it was fun to look at all. I probably watched the top 70 prospects, had all my notes in my notebook, was ready for draft night. It was a lot of fun. Fun to be back involved in football.
Did you get a nice catered dinner there in the conference room?
They had a good spread, some steak and chicken and salad.
Seriously,
like 3 Diet Pepsis. It was about 4.5 hours in the room with Pop and Lund. So I needed to keep the energy level up.
Well, those guys do an amazing job, and it's a great night. And then Lynch comes in and Shanahan comes in, and they kind of give you their spin or thoughts on what just happened. And sometimes they can whisper a few extra little things. Well, we almost did this and we almost did that, or we could have done this, or we did do that. So what'd you think overall before I lead you in any direction? What'd you think of the Niner draft, the draft haul as it was?
Yeah, it was an interesting sort of the way it all played out. I think the first round itself, because so much talk of the Niners, the load of draft picks they had, do they trade up and get somebody they really like? Do they trade out if there's 3 or 4 players that they like all of them and there's not one that stands out? So as the draft went on, I think the Michael Penix pick was certainly one that threw everybody in our room for a loop. But at the end, and Coach Shanahan and John Lynch said this, pretty much everybody they thought that was going to get drafted in the first round got drafted in the first round, not necessarily the team they thought. But it was a lot of fun as people, more and more players came off the board, and Niners decided not to make a trade and stick and pick. We had talked about them going with a receiver, especially with all the trade talk with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. We mentioned 3 guys, did not mention Pearsall. And when he went off the board, I had watched tape of him. I had my notes on him. And I think the thing that stood out, and a thing that Lynch and Shanahan both pointed out after the draft, they love his toughness. They love his commitment to football. He eats, breathes football. He loves it. He loves the game. He loves to get better, loves to work. And then you watch the tape, and he goes over the middle. He didn't stand out to me as a game breaker, the deep threat who runs by corners or safeties. He was more between the numbers, between the hashes. He caught everything. He took some big shots. He popped right back up. I thought the best commercial for him was the C.J. Stroud reaction. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I did.
Pro Bowl quarterback really wanted him. And when you see that reaction from another top quarterback in the league, knowing that he wasn't going to get him, I think 49er fans should take some solace in that. And I think Brock Purdy will have a lot of fun throwing him over the middle.
It was almost like there were 2 schools of thought on the guy. You know, the fans and the media to some degree, people who do a lot of Niner content online, they kind of panned the pick. And yet CJ Stroud clearly loved it. I forget which analyst it was, but some analyst put it out there that an anonymous scout said that he thinks that Pearsall has the kind of ability where he could catch 100 balls this year, which would be ridiculous in its own right. But you know what? I've talked to many quarterbacks before, from you to others, who, when they're talking about their favorite receiver, you know, the trait that, or the sentence that I've heard many, many times is, hey man, he'll go get it for you. And it's like, as a quarterback, you're putting those 50-50 balls out there. And in the NFL, there's no way around it. You have to put 50-50 balls out there and take a chance. You need a receiver who's going to go get it for you. And in some ways, I mean, I agree with Scott McCloughan, Todd, who said there were other receivers I like better, and I would have loved to have seen them go on the line of scrimmage with that pick. But as far as receivers go, this guy really does fit what Brock Purdy likes to do. And it's easy to envision Brock to Pearsall being pretty prolific, and maybe borderline unstoppable if they ever get on the same page and it's 3rd and 5, and Pearsall's going to run a little 7-yard stop route or a little in, little out, and turn around, and Brock knows exactly where he's going to be, and he throws with anticipation. That could be a very unstoppable 3rd down continuity piece that keeps the offense on the field. I think if you're a Niner fan, you should be somewhat excited just because of that potential.
If he catches 100 balls this year, the 49er offense is in trouble because they like to spread it around. They run the ball about 50% of the time too, and he's going to be competing for catches with Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey. He reminds me of Puka Nacua, a guy that came on mid-round pick last year, had to step up when Cooper Kupp got hurt. Some guys have a knack to get open. They understand where the defense is. They understand body control, kind of spatial awareness is how I like to describe it. They understand where the open shot is, get yards after the catch because they can position themselves to catch it and get 2 or 3 yards as the tacklers come to get them. He shows that. You watch some of the other guys. Xavier Worthy, I watched him. Fastest player in the history of the combine, absolute burner. He broke almost no tackles. If you watch his tape, go back and watch his tape. Very few times did he catch the ball. Now he ran by people, but he wasn't running through anybody. And if a guy got his hands on him, he was going to go down. Pearsall brings a little bit more toughness from that perspective because he will get yards after the catch and break tackles.
Yeah. It's funny, Brock, I don't know if you saw this last year. I know you watch a lot of Niner games, but there was one game where, and I forget which game it was, but it was Ray should have turned in, and the defender was in, and so he kind of made it up on his own. He turned out, and man, Brock Purdy verbally lit him up on the sideline. And I'm just kind of wondering, you played at Stanford, you had Troy Walters. You guys are probably pretty much in sync, but the NFL game, man, you better be in sync with your. I mean, in college, to some degree, I think you can kind of still throw it to an area, and there's a little bit more. I don't know what the term is, but there's a little bit more of that. In the NFL, it's like I'm throwing it to a spot, and you better be in that spot. And if you deviate, it's on you, and it could be a turnover, and it's a very serious problem. And it's just. I think this is the kind of guy that once he gets in lockstep with Brock could be a very, very valuable piece, at least.
I agree. And you look at Marvin Harrison, all those years for the Colts, right? Not an exceptionally athletic receiver, but with him and Peyton Manning on the same page, they were unstoppable.
Yeah, and Reggie Wayne too.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. So much of it is timing because those defensive backs can recover and have so much speed and quickness, they will bat it down. I think the big difference in college game, you can throw the ball here. In the pro game, you got to throw it here or here based on where the defender is, and that's where quarterbacks' accuracy separates those who are good from not as good, and then great from good. Right? You look at Tom Brady, not a physical specimen, but man, was he accurate. Peyton Manning, yeah. The guys who have consistent success. Are the ones who can put the ball where it needs to be to allow for yards after the catch. Imagine if you're completing 20 passes a game and you're able to get 3 or 4 extra yards because you put the ball where it's supposed to be, or you put it out in front on a crossing route and he gets 8 yards instead of getting tackled immediately because the ball was on his back hip. That adds up, and that adds up to more first downs. That adds up to more yards, better time of possession. And over the course of the season, it leads to more touchdowns. I think that is what Brock Purdy does, as well as anybody in the NFL right now.
Yeah. How well do you know? I mean, I always assume all these NorCal quarterbacks know each other. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, Todd Husak, former Stanford quarterback, joining us on the Krueger Show. And I thought maybe one of the best college football analysts in the country. When you were doing your stuff with Dave Fleming and Scott Reese and the color analyst work, I love your broadcast work was fantastic. And I know you got a whole nother career going, but how well do you know Alex Smith? Do you know Alex Smith at all? Have you met Alex Smith?
I do. Yeah, I've played golf with him a couple times. Super nice guy. One of the best people. Obviously, great quarterback, great athlete. One of the best people I've met in the game of football.
Yeah, he's such a good dude. He was on 95.7 The Game today with Willard and Dibley, and he was just talking about how pro football, playing pro quarterback in the NFL, it's all about accuracy, processing, and toughness. And he says that Brock Purdy has those traits, just across the board at a really high level. He's very accurate. He really processes well and quickly and consistently at the line of scrimmage, and he's tough. And he'll stand in there as guys are flying on by, and he'll stand in there and even take hits, and he's taken some monster hits. And then Smith said he has such a great balance of perspective and kind of mental maturity. He credited Brock. He said he was ready for his opportunity, and he's making the most of it. And he just talked about how the guy's focused and goal driven, and then they said, "Hey, is this guy elite?" And he's like, "Hey, man, this guy was top 3 in every quarterback category as a second-year player." And Smith commented that he feels like he has more courage in the pocket than any quarterback currently in the NFL. He thinks he's an underrated, really good athlete. And when they said, but is he elite? And they kind of pushed a little bit more. And he's like, "Oh yeah, this guy's elite, and he's going to be good for a long time." What do you think of that? I mean, actually, before you say anything, let me share the screen here with the audience for just a second, and people can see, we can hear for ourselves a little bit of this, and then we'll get Todd's comments. This is Alex Smith today on 95.7 The Game talking about Brock Purdy.
To see what he's done, it honestly, it's the best story in the NFL, the best story in football, one of the best stories in sports. And it's the real deal. Brock is the real deal. I think for everybody out there trying to say he's a product of the situation, listen, is Kyle a great offensive coordinator? Of course. Are there great weapons there? Yes. But they're half the league you could say that about. Listen, you go into not just the main stats, but you go into the deep kind of, some of these more underlying stats for, accuracy, throwing under pressure with a defender in proximity of him, passing outside the pocket, throwing the ball downfield. I mean, Brock was number 1 in the NFL in about every category there was. This guy does it all. And then you just turn on the tape and, the eye test, he passes it as well. I mean, this guy, I think, plays with more courage in the NFL than about any quarterback. And that's saying a lot. I mean, he's not a big guy, but man, he stands in there, and that's something you just can't coach. I'm sorry. Like you guys have it or they don't. You can look good in shorts and throw it all around the yard, but when you put the pads on and 350 pounders are bearing down on you, to have that kind of courage and stand in there and still have the poise and accuracy to keep his eyes downfield, again, it's just a really, really rare. And obviously, he can process and he can hit his spots. So man, he's going to be playing a long time at a high level. He's got that in him, and obviously, it's just so rare to have for a guy to have dropped that far in the draft. And, I think so many people just can't get over the fact that it doesn't add up for him, right? He's not 6'5". He's not throwing it 80 yards. Like, they don't have the measurables. They can't quantify it. But in the end, that's not what playing quarterback's all about anyway. And again, it's about accuracy and processing and toughness. And this guy has all those things. And so I certainly love contradicting. There's a lot of people out there that love to hate on him and knock him down. But man, it's he is the real deal, and incredibly happy for him. And it couldn't be to a better kid, man. This guy's as humble as they come and just has a great quiet confidence about him. To see what
it's so great to hear Smith. But what do you think, Todd, when you hear that? I mean, he really encapsulates Purdy quite well there.
I agree. I agree with everything he said. It was interesting to see some of the negative feedback on him this year, negative comments. He's in an offense surrounded by Pro Bowlers. Yeah, but he's one too. And if you watch his tape, he almost never makes mistakes, never makes bad decisions. He throws the ball where it's supposed to be. So to his point, he's processing. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo a couple of years ago, right, when his tenure with the Niners. He would have good games. He would make 3 throws a game into double coverage or make a decision, and everybody in the stadium is like, "Oh, what is he doing? What is he seeing?"
Right.
Purdy doesn't do
It
that.
was like if Jimmy didn't have, if the play that was called wasn't there and it was time to go off schedule and scan the field and make a play, man, you were just holding your breath.
Yeah. And so there's that negativity, I think, underestimates how good of a quarterback Brock Purdy is. And he would make throws consistently, amazing throws, like great touch passes over linebackers or in front of safeties. I think one thing that Alex Smith maybe didn't touch on, he talks about his toughness, the way his teammates reacted to him when he came in and played as a rookie in the season he had. It was really the first or second game that he played, the way his teammates talked about him and hyped him up, and they loved him. And you, to Alex's point, you can't fake that. You can't teach that. He had their respect. They knew he was a good player, one of them, and they were on board. They were on board with Brock Purdy being the starting quarterback for the rest of the season. That's not easy to do as a young player, to have that locker room respect, especially as the last pick in the draft. But the way he handles himself, the way he goes about his business, that I think is a huge indicator that he, not only the real deal, but a guy with staying power and somebody who will be a good quarterback for a very long time.
You know, I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was the first media day of the week on Tuesday of the game after the Dolphins game. And we're walking into the locker room, and I said to somebody, one of the other media people, I go, this is going to be a very interesting room in here. And the guy's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I mean, they just lost, they lost Trey Lance. They lost Jimmy Garoppolo. If they don't believe in Brock Purdy, despite the win over Miami, it's going to be a certain kind of vibe in here. And if they do, it's going to be loose and light and like nothing happened. And sure enough, it was loose and light, like nothing happened. And talking to some of the players later in the year about that moment, they said, you know what, we had seen it in camp. We had seen it in training camp, what this guy could do. And he really had won us over. And just the way he played in that first game against the Dolphins just kind of reconfirmed what we all saw this summer. So we had nothing but total confidence in the guy. So,
and by the way, that's not easy to do.
I know.
As a third-string quarterback, because you're not getting many reps.
Right.
So the fact that he was able to make the most of limited time, I give the 49ers credit too. Not many teams coach up their third stringer. Right? With Brian Griese on the staff, I think you give him a lot of credit, and Coach Shanahan a lot of credit for hiring a coach who can teach a young quarterback the game, the footwork, the reads. What are you doing pre-snap? Here's what you should be like. The fundamentals of the position. That Brock Purdy had played a lot of football in college, so he came in a pretty polished player. But to have a coach who can coach up a young player to play at that high of a level so early, to know the playbook, they didn't tone it down with him. They were doing shifts and motions, and I've seen some of those play calls. They are not easy to memorize. So to get him game ready at such a young stage in his career, you give the coaching staff and Brian Griese a lot of credit as well.
No question.
A lot of teams don't have that. A lot of teams, the quarterback coach would prefer not to coach a young player's fundamentals. They're just going to take the finished product from college and teach him the system. But they clearly spent a lot of time and energy and effort getting him ready to go.
Oh, and it's amazing. It's an incredible story. I do agree with Alex as well. This is the best story in football right now. The fact that they got this guy in the 7th round at the last pick and the level that he's playing at. And it's funny. I asked him a couple weeks ago about playing in the Super Bowl and what he took away from it. And he talked about he could have been better. And he did the classic humble leader thing of, I could be better. He didn't say anything about his teammates. It was all like, I need to be better. I'll be better in that. And then he's like, he said something that came across as, didn't seem like a strong comment, but it's a very almost borderline cocky comment. But the way he said it with total confidence, he's like, next time I'm in a game of that magnitude, I'll play differently. And it wasn't like, hey, if I'm lucky enough to make it back to the Super Bowl at some point, I realize I may never get, none of that. It's like total confidence that I will play in that game again, and I will play better in that game, and my team will prevail. And he didn't say it with he didn't pop his jersey or we'll be back. It was just like very matter of fact. Like, when I get in that game again, I'm going to play better.
He's like the anti-Zach Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Zach Wilson didn't read the room in New York, blamed his teammates, and this guy's just always takes the blame, never ever blames a teammate. What'd you think of the kid Cowing from Arizona? I'm sure you watched a lot of Pac-12 ball.
Yeah.
To me, he was my favorite pick in this draft. And then I read Matt Barrow's piece today in The Athletic on Scott McCloughan. And, McCloughan goes through the draft and, has his thoughts on what he thinks of each guy. And the guy that he loved in this draft was Cowing. He said he's a damn good football player. He's quick, fast. He's instinctive. He's competitive. He scored he said he scored a ton of touchdowns too, and he can get down the field and go. He's cool. He's really, really cool. What'd you think of Cowing? I mean, I thought that was a tremendous pick.
Yeah. Almost all of his catches that you watch his tape, not almost all, most of his catches were behind the line of scrimmage or near the line of scrimmage where they get him in space, he can catch and run. He is amazingly quick. You compare him to Xavier Worthy. The first guy rarely brought him down. He's got that elusiveness and really good vision and patience to set up his blocks on the perimeter, where that's not always easy because you got offensive linemen coming or tight ends coming from the inside. You got the receivers blocking on the outside. He did a really good job of yards after the catch, finishing in the end zone. I agree with you. I think he has a chance to be a key component to this offense. Ricky Pearsall is the bigger target over the middle. If they can find a few ways to get Cowing's ball, I think that could open up another dimension to this offense. And Kyle Shanahan loves to create mismatches for a defense.
Oh, it'd be incredible to watch. And something about Cowing, I love the route running, but I mean, there are small receivers. Like you played with a short receiver in Troy. You had a great one there in Troy Walters, but he wasn't small. You know what I mean? He was strong. Now, Troy Walters was probably stronger than this guy, but a lot of the same kind of real strong legs, real good precision footwork, catches the ball in a crowd, will take a hit. They're small guys, but then there are some guys like, I think Pearsall might be, even though he's a bigger body than Cowing, I bet you Cowing could probably take a bigger hit than Pearsall and hold on. Cowing just seems a little bit more rock solid in the way he catches the ball.
Yeah, a little bit like a running back on the perimeter, but he will go get the ball, and it maybe plays bigger than what he is. Troy Walters did a great job of that, where he could position his body and out jump corners or safeties at times if he needed to. But the way he could position himself to create some separation at the last moment and get away from them and make the catch and sometimes make them miss, you see some of those same qualities in Cowing.
One of the guys the Niners got after the draft is a former Stanford guy that I'm sure you know pretty well, Drake Nugent, who was at Stanford. He was the team captain. He was one of the best players on the team. And I think he was a grad transfer to Michigan. And then he was first team all Big Ten this year. And he's a kid. He's a prospect from Colorado, about 6'1", 300 pounds, 33-inch arms, 25 reps at 225. So that's pretty strong. He was a shot put champion, I guess, in high school. So he's stout and he's really powerful. He struggled against Michael Hall in the Buckeyes Michigan game because Hall's just so fast. But what do you think of Nugent? Do you think he's good enough, Todd, to be a starter at the next level? There's a lot of good traits there. Well,
I think one of the things you like, and it's certainly one of the things that the 49ers liked in their draft picks, a lot of it was like fifth-year senior, sixth-year senior. And Nugent fits guys. A lot of snaps, a lot of experience. If you're first team all Big Ten offensive lineman, that's saying something. They got some big dudes in that conference who can push people around. He's going to be smart. He's not going to make mental mistakes. He might get overpowered, or guys will run by him, like you said, Hall at Ohio State. But he's going to be solid. He's not going to be. I think you know where his floor is. Now the question is, where's his ceiling? Can he get much better enough to compete for a backup job and learn and get bigger and stronger? I mean, I remember Eric Heitman, longtime 49er center. He went into the NFL at probably like 305, 310. He was 340 in a couple of years and one of the strongest players in the NFL. So can Nugent get a little bit bigger, stronger, more powerful? Absolutely. And all of a sudden you combine that with his experience and knowledge. I think he has a chance to catch on with the team.
What is he? Would you say that is he anywhere approaching Drew Dahlman, or is Dahlman on a different level? Dahlman's had a nice little run in Atlanta. They're both Stanford guys who played center.
I'd say they're similar. Dahlman was really undersized when he came to Stanford. Again, Dahlman maybe played with a little more toughness. He was a mean son of a gun, a little bit like his dad when he played. But Nugent is steady. But yeah, I would compare those two. A similar body type, similar athleticism.
It's funny. Chris Dahlman's such a nice guy, and I think he's the principal of a school now. But you're right. He was nasty. Oh, is it in Salinas?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. He was one of the captains, honorary captains one year, and he brought his whole family up, and you can just tell he's a great guy. I mean,
great guy. Between the lines, he was a tough dude.
Eric Heitman was a really underrated player too. I think the Niners got him in the 6th round. I had him on my show on a regular basis back then, and he was one of the steals of that draft. I mean, he had a really nice career. Eric Heitman and he's a great dude as well. Heitman's a terrific guy.
Outstanding guy. A very talented musician too.
Oh, is he? What does he play? Yeah. He's the pride of Katy, Texas.
Pianist. He actually is moving to Scotland right now to pursue a career in music.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice second career.
Oh yeah, man, I should get him on, man.
He was a late round pick. I remember being with the Jets when he was an All-American at Stanford, outstanding player. And the Jets had questions about his back. And he had a back injury. And I told him, I can't remember him missing a game at Stanford. One of the best, toughest guys I ever played with. You should draft him. And they passed on him and ended up having, I think, a 10-year career with the Niners. And he started probably 7 or 8 of those years.
Yeah. Really good player. He played during some rough times as far as the Niners. They didn't have great teams, but terrific guy. And we used to do a Thursday night thing with me and him on KMBR where he was on for an hour and just would talk. And what is it about the offensive lineman outside of quarterbacks? Maybe the O lineman might be the best interviews on a football team. They always seem like they know what's going on. They've got great perspective. They're almost always pretty. I mean, this is kind of a weird thing to say because we're making huge generalizations. Some guys don't like to talk at all, but they're almost always introspective and interesting interviews.
A little more cerebral.
Why is that?
A little more cerebral than some of the other positions. I think it's a complicated position to learn. And maybe that lends itself to guys with a little more going on upstairs and they can add more outside of football than some of the other positions typically.
No, it's interesting. A couple more with you. Isaac Guerendo and Cody Schrader were the 2 running backs the Niners signed. And Schrader is small and slow and yet led the SEC in rushing. And to me, looks kind of like a poor man's Blake Corum. I think that was a tremendous college undrafted free agent. The Niners and under Bobby Turner are so good at finding these guys. And Schrader is tremendous. And he ran 4.61 and he's rather small, but you know what? To me, I'll take a chance every day on a guy who played that well in a conference that strong with that many good defenders. And then Guerendo's interesting. Scott McCloughan says that he may, in his opinion, he may not even make the football team, which would be a dramatic thing. The Niners traded 2/5 to get into the 4th for Guerendo. He's 6'1", 220, he runs 4.33. But I understand what McCloughan's saying because wasn't a starter really at Wisconsin or at Louisville. He only started that one game against SC in the bowl game. He was awesome, but he doesn't have a lot of starting experience. He's kind of straight line. I don't know. What do you think of Guerendo and Cody Schrader? I think, in both cases, they're really intriguing.
But the only other player I believe who I saw this stat somewhere who was over 220 pounds and ran a 4.3 was DK Metcalf.
Right.
So pretty elite company.
And this guy was a wide receiver. He was Indiana's Mr. Football, coming out of high school. So he was a receiver, interestingly enough.
Yeah. Watching his tape, he's really a one-cut back. Mm-hmm. He gets going downhill. What I like about him, he makes decisions. Now, he shows some patience at times, but he kind of lets things go, and then he plants his foot, and he goes, and he gets his shoulder square down the field. He will run over, through, by people. I really liked his tape. I was surprised he lasted that long in the draft because he has a lot of the qualities. I think the position of running back has been so devalued, but he's a game breaker. He catches the ball really well. He's decisive. He can change direction. He's not just the straight line guy. He can change direction, plant his foot, and cut back if he needs to. But once he gets his momentum going, he's going to get positive yards because he's a tough runner and a big body. And then to your point, I wonder if the leading rusher in the SEC has ever gone undrafted. I would imagine no. I mean, they've had quite a few studs coming out of that conference over the last few decades. Anytime you can add a player that productive in a conference that solid, and again, Coach Shanahan and John Lynch said it afterward, if you can add a good football player to your team, it not only makes your team better, but it pushes the guys ahead of them. And I think that's one of the things that guides them throughout the draft. Let's just add as many good football players, or in free agent signings, let's add as many good, productive football players as we can, because to your point, who knows where you're going to find a guy? It might be the last pick of the draft, might be a free agent, and they've got quite a few 4th and 5th round players right now on the 49ers roster who are making Pro Bowls. So you're right. They can identify talent and put guys, not just great football players, but guys that fit into their system who can come in and contribute early in their careers and have success.
What did you think of CMC, or what have you thought of CMC so far in a Niner uniform? I mean, he was good at Carolina, but in this offense where there's so many other weapons and Kyle calling the plays, he's so spectacular. But some people think like he's near the end, and it's like, wait a second. This guy's playing at a pretty high level right now. I don't know that I see the end coming for him anytime soon. But what do you think of, you saw him at Stanford, you saw him at Carolina, and now you're seeing him with Shanahan calling the plays in this multi-dimensional offense. Do you think they're utilizing him to his full capacity, or do you think there's things that Kyle has yet to do with him?
Larry, I got to call you out. When he got drafted, you said he was Wes Welker. I totally thought, a tailback. Yeah. He's an I-back. He ran behind a fullback his entire career at Stanford.
I thought he was a gadget player.
Yeah.
That he, that wouldn't be able to stand up to the every down punishment. And I felt somewhat vindicated as he got injured quite a lot early, but he's then taken his kind of athleticism to the next level. He's made an adjustment. His body is stronger than it was when he came into the league. And he does, at least with the Niners, knock on wood, the injuries have not been there. He's been able to stay healthy.
Yeah, I think he can do it all. And I think when he joined the 49ers and giving Kyle Shanahan that flexibility of a Pro Bowl, an all-pro type player, guy who can block, who can run screens, who can run reverses, who's as good of a between the tackles runner as there is in the NFL, really does it all. I think to your point, you watch him play a little bit like Emmitt Smith. You almost never saw Emmitt Smith get hit hard, right? They have a way, they have their vision, their peripheral vision. They see a hit coming. They wrap up the ball. They can kind of contort their body where they're always falling forward. And I think Christian McCaffrey does a great job of that. He takes as good a care of himself as anybody in the NFL, but he played a lot of snaps last year. He was over 90% of the snaps when he was healthy. They've got to find some guys who can take a little bit of the burden, even if it's 10 fewer snaps, 15 fewer snaps per game, which I think allows him to be fresher when he does get the ball. And I'm sure taking him out of the game is not easy. That's as competitive a guy as you're going to find. But that would be my only concern of him going forward. He's done it all. And he makes – I remember when they signed him, and I think I came on KBR, I said he's going to make not only is his running game spectacular, everybody on that offense is going to be more productive because all of a sudden defenses have to be worried about McCaffrey. And they can't double Ayuk, and they can't double Kittle, and they certainly can't double Debo. So, and that's what you saw. The way defenses have to pick their poison, all of a sudden you're going to get single coverage on the outside, or Kittle's going to be open, and also McCaffrey's going to rush for 140 yards and catch 6 balls. So him coming to the 49ers really opened up everything else. And when that offense has everybody healthy, including Trent Williams at left tackle, it's as powerful and explosive a group as you're going to find. Miami had a great season last year, but their balance, I think, is what separates them from Miami. They can break the big run as easily as they can break a big pass, and they can wear you down. They can have those 13-play drives where they pick up 5, 6, 7 yards a chunk. It doesn't have to be the big play. So there's so many ways that the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan can game plan and beat up a defense. And I think he's the catalyst. As good as Debo, when Debo went out, I think you would see the defense take a step, or the offense, take a step backwards and not being as consistently productive. But McCaffrey being in there really changes the entire dynamic of the offense.
How well do you know John Lynch? You know John Lynch pretty well?
Yeah, I've got to know him through Stanford, and then a few times I've connected with him at the Niners. But he comes to Stanford events every now and then. I've played in a golf tournament with him. I know him a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw him today. He was on the McAfee show and just talking about how he reached out to Kyle and told him, hey, I know you're looking for a GM, and this is, obviously back in 2017. And, would you consider me, and so on and so forth. And Kyle came back with, why would you want to do this? And it does it surprise you? I mean, see, I'm talking to somebody who does know the hours that these guys put in. Like, you have a whole career now, but you probably show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and you probably leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something. But I mean, if you're in football, your hours are ridiculous. These guys are, even at the college level, but at the pro level, these guys are working. The coaches, the executives, they're there at 5 a.m. It's a year-round deal. They're there till midnight. They're wed to their job over their families. There's a price to be paid. Are you surprised that John Lynch seems to be totally enthralled in what he's doing and absolutely determined to get that 6th Lombardi in the trophy case for a franchise that he never played it down for? Are you surprised that he gave up the cush Fox? He's living in LA, he's living in San Diego. He's got a beautiful family. I'm sure he's got a beautiful house. God knows San Diego, there's enough things you can create things to do in San Diego and be pretty happy. Are you surprised? He's probably making a couple $1,000,000 with Fox, and now he's making maybe $1 million more, but he's working ridiculous hours more. Are you surprised that he gave up the TV gig for the football thing, or that he stayed this long at it?
To your point, that football jobs are mostly a grind, right? To your point, they're in the office early, they're home late, they travel. TV is not a grind. TV, right. You come out and do a production meeting during the week, you work on Sunday for a few hours, and you're home. So that was quite a lifestyle change. I think his passion about the game and the desire to be more involved than just announcing, to be involved in building a team and building a championship team, but being around the guys. I think you talk to former players, and yes, they miss the games and the crowds and the money. I think they miss the locker room. If you were to have guys,
the camaraderie of the whole thing.
Yeah. The
singular, we know exactly if we succeeded or failed at the end of the day.
And everybody working hard towards a single goal. That is probably the biggest transition for athletes to leave their sport. That locker room is special. And now, while he's not a player, I think he's in a pretty close position where he can go. He knows the players. He can celebrate with them. But building a team that is so successful as they've been. Now, they haven't reached the top of the mountain with him, but he has put together one of the best rosters in the NFL, and he's made trades and brought in Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey, and he's drafted some Pro Bowlers. I think that his competitiveness, I think, drove him to do a little bit more than just announce on Sundays. And every time I've seen him, even after, I think I saw him at Stanford, he was walking around Lake Lagunitas, and I saw him and his wife and his daughter. And even after the season ended, you could tell he loved what he's doing. He's passionate about it. And him and Kyle Shanahan, I think, have a special relationship, and what he's brought. I know Niners fans are frustrated that they haven't gotten that 6th Lombardi. It's hard to win in the NFL. It's really hard. It's really hard to win 3, 4, 5 years in a row, as a lot of teams in the NFL, a lot of fans in the NFL know. So for him to put together this roster and to find players like Brock Purdy and to bring in players like Christian McCaffrey, we're lucky to be here and be 49er fans and have guys like Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch running the show.
2 or 3 more with Todd Husak, who's kind enough to join us on this Thursday night on the Krueger Show. There is, despite the fact the Niners have been in like 4 of the last 5 NFC title games, and they've got an offense that produces points, and they've got their franchise quarterback entering his prime, there's an awful lot of kind of, I don't know how to label them, if they're fans or if they're content creators, if they're just, but they've really centered on Kyle Shanahan sucks. And to me, I just can't. This is where I part ways with these people. I can't listen to it. To me, he hasn't done it yet. So he's Andy Reid with the Eagles, but Andy Reid now has 3 rings, and I think Shanahan's going to have multiple rings before he's done as well. What would you say, as somebody who played the game at a really high level in college, in the pros, and maybe knows Kyle Shanahan and understands his relative genius or whatnot, skill level as a play caller, play designer, so on and so forth? What would you say to the person? Because I'm sure you've encountered this person as well. The Niners, it's a conversation. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, man, Shanahan sucks, man. He really, he's blown it. He's the reason we're never going to win the big one with Shanahan. What would you say to the Shanahan detractors, Todd? You would do it so much more diplomatically than I would.
I disagree. I think so. It's not just coaches don't just show up on Sundays, right? It's the culture of the team and the attitude of the team. And I played for a number of different coaches in the NFL, some very successful, some not as successful. What he's done in creating a culture with the 49ers in lockstep with John Lynch, it's special. It is a special team and one that 49ers fans should be proud of. He's created something that is, I think, it almost snowballs every year. Like I played for the Broncos under his dad, Mike Shanahan, and the way
was young Kyle hanging around back there.
Young Kyle was hanging around, but they brought in veterans who knew how to operate, who knew the program, who could essentially run practice. Like if we had a bad play at practice with the Broncos, the players would, all right, let's do that again. Let's get it right. Right? We missed the block, or we missed the throw, we missed the route. Let's do it again. There's attention to detail throughout, and I think that culture that he's created is one of attention to detail, and the guys work hard. He gets guys to play their best. The offense, having that many weapons on offense isn't easy. And yet he's created something where he had 3,000-yard receivers and a 1,000-yard back and a 4,000-yard passer. So he's created an offensive system that is certainly successful. He hires great people. I think that's an underrated part of what Kyle Shanahan has done, is surround himself with people who are really smart and really capable and talented, as we've seen with some of his assistant coaches going on to have success in Miami, in New York, in Houston. And he's able to backfill those positions with equally capable people. And so I think those traits, I love watching his offense. As a fan of the offensive game, some of the plays he creates, he comes up with new things almost every week that I've never seen before that typically work. And that's hard to do. So he's constantly innovating. He loves football. We talked about Ricky Pearsall loving football earlier. I don't know if there's a guy in the organization who loves it more than Kyle Shanahan, and it shows. And he's prepared on game day. You don't see like clock management errors. He is sharp. He hires great people around him. And to your point, maybe they'd have a couple rings if they didn't go up against what I think might be the greatest quarterback of all time in Mahomes. He's kind of heading that direction. So that's tough to say, but that success that he's had and the culture he's created is something special in the NFL.
We're such a win or else kind of a society. It's like, we celebrate the people who win, but if you come really, really close, you might as well not have even tried.
Ask Bears fans how they've enjoyed the last 20 years, right?
Right, exactly. Cade McNown era.
Yeah, we've been pretty spoiled here in the Bay Area with the Niners.
Absolutely. I mean, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Jeff Garcia, Alex Smith, Kaepernick. Now and obviously now Brock Purdy, and Purdy looks like he's headed towards an incredible year. Two last ones. One was one of the other things that came out today with the McAfee thing with Lynch is Lynch kind of told the story how Steve Slowick, one of their personnel guys whose brother is the OC for the Texans and D'Amico Ryans, really had gone to Ames, Iowa, and looked at Iowa State and looked at Purdy and was banging the table. They thought he was coming out the year before, so this guy was on him for over a year. And Matt Campbell told him, hey, this guy's really, this guy's the reason we have the culture that we have here, and he's vital to us, and this and that, and really talked up Purdy. And that Steve Slowick, banged the table in the draft room and in the draft meetings for Brock Purdy, and then that he got Brian Griese. Have you ever met Brian Griese? Do you know Griese?
Yeah, I played with him in Denver.
Okay, so you know him. Supposedly Griese was became just as convicted in his belief in Brock Purdy as Slowick, and that Griese and Slowick convinced Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to take a deeper look at him. And eventually, obviously, they didn't do a great job of convincing him because they didn't take him until the last pick of the draft. But now here we go. Fast forward to this year, and the Niners have signed Tanner Mordecai. And I kind of heard that Brian Griese was hot to trot on Mordecai. And I mentioned I was going to ask you about him today. We haven't really seen him, but he started at Oklahoma. He went to SMU. He put up some prolific numbers at SMU, then jumped to Wisconsin. And, had 9 touchdowns, 4 picks at Wisconsin, much tougher conference and defensively, but still played, broke his hand against Iowa, came back in the bowl game against LSU like 4 weeks later. And, basically the head coach there, Fickle, said, man, I just love the fact that, there was never any question of whether or not he would play in the bowl game against LSU. And like 5 weeks after hand surgery on his throwing hand, he goes up in the bowl game in the ReliaQuest Bowl against LSU, throws for 378 yards and 3 touchdowns. They wind up losing the game in a shootout. But any thoughts on Tanner Mordecai? I mean, what interests me, Todd, is that we're talking about a guy who's 6'1", 210, and the more I watch him, the more I can see a lot of the traits. I mean, he seems like a really authentic leader. He seems pretty fiery, seems kind of tough. When he takes off to run, he's running down the middle of the field. He's got 4.46 speed, which was incredibly fast, 36.5-inch vert. Had an average year this year, but the last 2 years, 33 touchdowns, 10 picks, 39 touchdowns, 12 picks. What do you think? Is Tanner Mordecai something, or is this just a guy who's going to lose out to Brandon Allen? Because I kind of see him as a guy who might be able to actually beat out Brandon Allen, which is going to be hard to do because Brandon Allen is a trusted veteran, somebody Kyle believes in.
Based on what I saw, I think he's got – I like how you describe him. He's a good athlete. He had a lot of success. His throwing motion is very loopy, and something that I think I'd be surprised if he beat out Allen for the 3rd spot. Not to say he wouldn't be a good fit on the practice squad. He's got to fix his throwing motion. If you watch his throwing, he throws exactly like Kevin Hogan, the former Stanford quarterback who played a handful of years in the NFL. Very loopy, brings the ball down. He lowers it below his belt. If he can fix that, I think you're right. He has a lot of the intangibles that I think coaches love. Coaches love to see. Played a lot of football in college, threw for a lot of yards, has nice touch on the deep ball. If he can fix his fundamentals on the throwing motion, he has a chance to maybe compete for a backup job in a few years.
Why is it that we have such a hard time evaluating quarterbacks? Why is it? I mean, everybody knows a good one when they see one, but it's almost like they can't project one from the Pac-12 to the NFL or the ACC to the NFL, or, in Brock Purdy's case, the Big 12 to the NFL. Why is it so hard to project quarterbacks? I mean, Belichick went on with McAfee last week and before the draft and was like, quarterbacks in the first round and wide receivers in the first round are about a 50-50 proposition. Why is that? Why is it so hard to evaluate these guys correctly?
Well, look at the draft from 2021, right? There's 5 guys that go in the first round, 4 are no longer even with the team that drafted them.
It's amazing.
And all of those guys, Alex Smith brought up something. If you were to put all of those guys next to Brock Purdy in shorts and just have them throw and go through a workout, Brock probably doesn't make the cut of being – maybe he's better than Mac Jones. But Mac Jones is bigger and stronger and maybe has a better arm. I think there's a lot that goes into the quarterback position. There's a lot that goes into the success of a quarterback, the coach, the team, the players around him, the offensive line. You look at a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, early in his career, they didn't ask him to do much. Hand the ball off to Jerome Bettis, throw for 150 yards, and don't turn it over. And he did that for a few years, and they had a lot of success. And all of a sudden, he's in his 4th and 5th year, and he's throwing for 3,800 yards and 4,000 yards. And so he had the time and the franchise and the pieces around him where he could grow into that position and have a lot of success. Sometimes guys are thrown in too early, maybe before they're ready. They don't know the offense. Sometimes the team around him stinks. I mean, Justin Fields was thrown to a bunch of terrible players. I think part of it is if Justin Fields had gotten drafted by the Rams or the Seahawks, he probably has a different first 3 years of his career. So there's a lot of factors. Frankly, some guys aren't mentally made up for it. Zach Wilson didn't have the maturity and mental makeup to be successful, specifically in New York. But clearly, when things didn't go well, he was not the guy out in front leading like Brock Purdy is. He was the guy making excuses and throwing his teammates under the bus. So part of it is the maturity level. But to your point, there's some guys that come in with the mental. By the way, it's amazing. Tom Brady, the most decorated quarterback, winningest quarterback in history. If Drew Bledsoe doesn't get hurt, when do we hear of Tom Brady?
I know. It makes you wonder, huh?
3 years later, 4 years later, maybe not at all. So there has to be some kind of luck involved. But I think what Alex Smith said, with the accuracy, the toughness, the ability to make quick decisions, make the right decisions quickly, I think those are 3 pretty consistent parts of all successful quarterbacks. Then you got, what's the fascinating thing about the position, you got guys like Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson and Tom Brady together in a room, you wouldn't think they played the same sport, let alone the same position. And they play it very differently, but both play at an incredibly high level. So they need the coaches around them who can get the most out of their talent, design an offense that fits their skill set, and then players around them who can make them better, an offensive line, hopefully. And so all of those things combine for quarterback success. And if you're lacking one of those things, or certainly more than one, it's going to be much tougher for that quarterback to have a lot of success. Patrick Mahomes is a perfect example. Andy Reid drafts him. Andy Reid, I think, is one of the greatest coaches in the history of football, and creates a system that allows Patrick Mahomes to get the most out of himself and really empowered him to use some of his creative abilities and his speed and his work outside the pocket, and certainly surrounded him with a bunch of playmakers. If Patrick Mahomes gets drafted by the Bears, he's not Patrick Mahomes. Maybe he's out of the NFL by now, right? So I think all of the stars need to be aligned for quarterbacks to have a long, successful career.
No, it's amazing. It really is true. Last topic. The quarterbacks that went in the first round, there were 6. Who did you like? Who did you believe in out of the 6? You're talking about it matters where you go. So Penix went to Atlanta. He's going to sit behind Cousins. McCarthy went to Minnesota. He's going to sit behind Darnold, it sounds like initially. You had Bo Nix go to Denver. He might play right away. And for Sean Payton. And then you had the North Carolina kid go
Drake
to
May.
Drake May to North Carolina, Caleb to the Bears, and Jalen to the Commanders. Who do you like of that group? And did you need to know who went where before you would say, you know what, I like that guy, or I like that guy?
I was able to watch every snap from all those players in their last year of college, so got a lot of studying done on them. I really like Penix. I think he has. I
do too.
A skill set that lends it. He has quick feet. I was surprised how fast he ran. He ran like a 4.4, 4.5. But that didn't show up on tape. He rarely ran and got yards with his legs. He throws an incredible deep. He throws one of the most catchable balls I've ever seen. Just
gigantic hands, and he just
and he was
laser.
He won a lot of games at Indiana, which isn't easy to do, and then of course all the success he had at UW. I just like his game. I think if I took all of those guys, I think I'd take him first. Caleb Williams is an exceptional athlete.
You take him over Caleb.
I would take him over Caleb.
I would too. I said it last week that I would take Penix over Caleb. And I know he sometimes throws off his back foot, but man, I watched him against Utah on the road against the Utes, put it into tight windows against a really good defense.
Yep.
He was the best player at the combine, easily the best thrower. I saw him on a Thursday night in Seattle last year, I think, where it was like 37-mile-an-hour winds or something like that, and the other team's quarterback couldn't throw at all, and he was just throwing lasers that cut right through it.
Yeah, no, I like him a lot. Certainly the leadership and maturity. I'm not a Caleb Williams fan. I think
I'm not either.
His highlight tape is great. His low light tape is awful. I mean, he makes a ton of bad decisions, mistakes. I think he has trouble going through his progression. I thought he escaped the pocket way too much. It almost seemed like he was trying to make highlight plays all the time instead of running the offense. That doesn't fly in the NFL where defensive ends and edge rushers run 4.5s. And so he's got to become a much better pocket passer for them to have success. He's going to be surrounded by some pretty good receivers.
Yeah.
I also didn't like his mental makeup. I think some of the antics he had at USC, he needs to grow up a lot. He needs to be the leader, the guy in that locker room. He needs to have the Brock Purdy approach versus the Zach Wilson approach. And I thought he had a little too much Zach Wilson in him for my taste. I like Jaden Daniels. I think he's shown enough as a pocket passer and, of course, the athleticism to make plays with his legs. I think he needs same thing. He's not going to be able to run like that at the pro level. So can he become a better pocket passer? He's played a lot of football. One thing that scares me, he was like 180 pounds when he transferred to LSU. He's thin.
He's only about 210. I wonder about the durability in the chest. If he takes a big hit,
Yeah, and Drake May is an interesting one because he has the size. He's 21 years old, right? That's another interesting thing. You had Penix and Nix, who are 24, and Drake May, who's 21. So how do coaches value that? Would you rather have a guy with 2 or 3 more years of college experience or a guy with maybe more upside and somebody you can coach and help get better? Drake May has the big arm. He's a good athlete as well. His mechanics, I think, make me a little nervous. Same with Bo Nix. Throw off their back foot a lot. Decision-making not always consistent. And he's going to be in a situation where Washington wants a quarterback. They need a quarterback. Is he ready to play early in his career? Can he handle the setbacks? Washington can be a tough place for a young quarterback, a little bit like Chicago. If you're not having success, he's going to hear about it a lot. And so is he ready to go in? So out of the group, I like Daniels. I like Penix the best. I like Daniels. I think there's some serious questions about the other 4 and whether or not they can have early success because other than Penix, I think most of them are going to have to play their rookie season.
Yeah, no, that's funny. We definitely see it exactly the same. I thought Penix was the best. I like Penix.
I didn't even talk about J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, I mean, and McCarthy's interesting. I mean, he's a win. He won a ton in high school. He won a ton at Michigan. But what do you see there? I mean, I have a hard time even evaluating his skill set. I always admire the Michigan quarterbacks because, man, if you can do it in the big house in front of 108,000 people, man, there's a proven, that to me, that's proving it to some degree. I loved Elvis Grbac coming out of there and well before Tom Brady. But what do you think? I mean, is McCarthy, there's something about McCarthy that's either kind of hokey or kind of high school hairy-ish. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, Harbaugh has spent the last year building this guy into, this incredible, he's everything all wrapped into one.
Best college quarterback he's ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, it's just,
Harbaugh said.
If I see Harbaugh pounding that kid's shoulder pads one more time, I'm going to puke.
What's funny is the first thing everybody says, he's a winner. He won.
Right.
The defense stopped Ohio State, or Alabama's running back, right? I mean, or the quarterback. The defense won more games, I think, at Michigan for that team than J.J. McCarthy did.
And he was surrounded by Corum got drafted, Henderson got drafted, Keegan got drafted, Wilson got drafted. I mean, he had all kinds of talent on both sides of the ball around him.
He has a good arm. He throws his release point is low. He's going to have to work on that. He throws a lot of laser beams. I talked about Penix throwing a really catchable ball and putting some air underneath it when necessary. McCarthy throws a lot of laser beams. So he's going to have to work on that. He takes a really long stride when he throws. If you watch him, his feet are really wide apart, which doesn't lend itself necessarily to the NFL, where sometimes the pocket can get pushed back. You got to be able to take a shorter stride and get rid of the ball with a high release point to get it over the offensive lineman. So it's some mechanics things I think he can work on. He's a good athlete. He throws well on the run. I think it'll be fascinating. He's got a great coach in Minnesota. He's got some great playmakers around him. I think he's set up. If he can go in and just be, he doesn't need to do anything special. He doesn't need to be great. He just get the ball in those receivers' hands. I think he's set up for early success. I just don't know if he has the mechanics to be consistently good. And we'll see how well he sort of processes. That was the other thing that Alex Smith talked about. Can he process that information quickly? He had a good career at Michigan, no question about it. But the NFL is a different ballgame, and he's going to have to make some quick decisions that I don't think Harbaugh gave him. Yeah, he didn't have to. He'll have to do it a lot more than he did at Michigan.
Smith said one last thing today I thought was really interesting too. He talked about Mahomes. He said people see Mahomes and the unbelievable throws that he makes and this and that, but this guy is so good at processing at the line of scrimmage and setting protections, and he's just like, he doesn't ever see it wrong. And he said, and then Alex, who's like, very honest, said, I thought I was a hard worker, and by the time I was in my 11th year or whatever, when he was a rookie, obviously I knew the NFL routine. He's like, I never once got to the facility and this guy wasn't already there. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that right there, it's like everybody's looking at their watch. Are you looking at your watch at home dying to get to the facility? Or are you looking at your watch at the facility dying to get home? Yeah. It sounds like Mahomes was like, absolutely driven to succeed. And I guess, on some level, that's probably what it takes, right?
Great ones are.
Yeah. Hey, man, great stuff. We really appreciate you. And so overall, I mean, I won't ask you for a grade, but overall, you feel pretty good about what the Niners got done in the draft, huh?
I do. I think there's guys. I really like Mustafa. I think that guy he flies. You watch the tape, he flies around. I like the offensive lineman from SC. So I think
you do. You like the offensive lineman from SC?
I do. I think he's NFL
center?
ready.
Is he a center or is he a guard or
guard?
Yeah.
I think he's NFL ready. Tell you what, have me back on in 3 years. We'll give it an accurate grade.
Yeah, no, though, seriously. Hopefully we can get you on before that. Hey, man, good to see you. And always a pleasure. Thanks to the sponsors, Pig and a Pickle, Underdog Fantasy. Check the link in the description. Use that promo code Krug. Pig and a Pickle, 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. Marin Auto Glass. Thanks to Marin Auto Glass and the good people there. MarinAutoGlass.com. And last but not least, if you're a sports cards and collectibles fan, thanks to Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove. Anthony Catania. Give him a call, 831-521-5264. For Todd Husak, I'm Larry Krueger. Hope you enjoyed the Krug Show. I'm back in the morning at 8:30 a.m. or 8:45 a.m. with Damon Bruce. Tomorrow at 10:45 with Chase Sr. Big Friday on the Krug Show as we continue talking Niner football and Warrior basketball and Giants baseball all around the clock. Have a great night, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of.